Good morning again. My name is Monica Staaf, and I'm the General Counsel for the Rhode Island Association of Realtors and statewide MLS. Welcome to our legislative update today. I know people are still kind of trickling in, but we're in the interest of those of you who made it on time, we're going to just start pressing along. So today we've got some ACE panelists who are going to give you the ins and outs of what happened at the Rhode Island General Assembly this session, and also what happened at NAR, what's going on with Congress. So here are a couple questions for you. Not the panelists, I'm asking the audience. Did rent control pass? Are there any tax changes this year? Stay tuned, you will get answers to those burning questions. So let me just talk about a few logistics, and then I'm going to turn things over to our panelists. Our program will run today from 9:30 to 11. This will be recorded, as you probably heard when you were logging in. The recording will be posted on rirealtors.org sometime early next week. And then if you have any questions, because of the number of people, we had about 250, I believe, registered for the program. Because of the number, we're not going to be able to unmute you to ask questions, but instead, if you look for the Q&A on your computer, on mine it's on the bottom next to share. Yours might be on the top, depending what device you're logging in with. But if you select Q&A, you'll be able to post questions that way. So once our panelists finish, we'll have a chance to ask them questions and put them on the hot seat. Okay, I think these are my announcements. And I would like to well, actually, right before I do that, I will be calling on the president-elect of the Rhode Island Association of Realtors, Mike Pereira, who you can see on your screen. But before I do that, I'd like to recognize Mike and then our president, Chris Whitten, who's, I believe, on vacation with his family, and so many volunteers who spent late nights at the State House. It's really incredible that, and I say this as a staff person who gets paid, it's incredible how many people have taken time from their businesses and worked hard to advocate on behalf of the Realtor Association. So I appreciate all that Mike and Susan and all of you have done as volunteers. Okay, without further ado, Mike Pereira will share a few of his experiences burning the late night oil at the State House, and he'll introduce our other two panelists. Mike, go right ahead.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you for taking time out of your day to be here. We're super excited to go over our legislative recap with you. Obviously, you know, I'm Mike Pereira, president-elect of the Rhode Island Association of Realtors, and also the chairperson for our RPAC Participation Council. And we had a very, very busy legislative session this year. We spent countless nights and many hours, dozens of hours, testifying with regards to legislation that we feel we're in favor of, that protect home ownership rights, and those things that we're opposed of that could potentially harm our industry and home ownership as well. So it was a pretty exciting year. I'm not sure we got everything we wanted this year, but the great thing about it is that next year we'll go after at it again and try to get things either modified to better serve our community, or hopefully things walked back, which usually isn't the case, but we always try. So I'm super excited. We had a lot of people participate. It's usually the same faces that spend time at the State House. But what is more important is I'm glad you guys are here today, because I'm asking you if you think that it's something that you want to get involved in. I highly encourage you do so. It not only helps you understand how these things work better, but it shows your community and the people you work around that you care about our industry and you care about home ownership. And it really, really, really does help your career. So if you haven't done anything on the legislative side and have been thinking about it, I highly encourage it. Now, without further ado, I want to introduce to you both Susan Martins-Phipps, who happens to be our Government Affairs Chair, and Trevor Chasse, who is our Government Affairs Director. Back to you guys.
Thank you, Mike. I appreciate that. I do want to not only thank you, but also the staff that I have that has also been supporting me. So Monica has definitely been a huge help with supporting me. Carrie's been helping me with doing a lot of testimony as well. And then obviously the volunteers, I really can't be any more grateful for their support as well, going up to the State House with us, testifying, being inside meetings with whether it be the AG or members of the General Assembly. So I really do appreciate that. And as Mike alluded to too, that I also want to emphasize, definitely this is such a great opportunity for people to get involved in trying to learn the process a little bit more. I only have been here a year, but I can say that, we are putting forth some programs that are being sorted out so that way we can get more people engaged and involved. Hopefully we can get we're looking at our first CE government affairs class that we are waiting on to be approved by the Department of Board and Regulations. And then there are going to be some other programs down the line to help people get familiar with the process and hopefully become more involved. So that way we can expand and make our voice louder. Susan, do you want to make any opening remarks?
Sure. Thank you. I really want to thank the committee. There's I think 11 of us or 12 of us that we meet every other week. And then when Trevor calls an really important meeting, he gets us all on the phone. And without the help of the volunteers, it would be, really difficult. I also want to thank Trevor. Trevor's only been on the job for a year and he hit the ground more than running. He was like a racehorse around that track. And he comes with a lot of experience, despite the fact of his young age, but he's very, very wise and he has a political bone in his body. I think every bone is political in his body. So he really understands what's going on at the State House. So Trevor, thank you so much. Congratulations. You've had a great year. And we really want to thank you. I also want to thank our other lobbyist, Lynette Ferre-Menard, who countless hours at the State House. Without Trevor and without Lynette, I don't know what we would be doing, but we have a lot of things that we won this year. We have a couple of defeats that we'll be talking about too. But pretty much the team and Mike's new team for next year, they're ready to take on and hit the hill again. So again, thank you so much, Trevor. Thank you, Monica. Thank you, Carrie. Thank you, Phil. So all you guys have done a great job for the Realtor members. So thank you.
Great. Thank you. So I think we want to just hop in and we'll get started. So I will say that the biggest thing that really comes out of the legislative session, obviously with the proposed bills, any changes to existing laws, is the budget. The budget is definitely the biggest thing in my opinion. That really lays out a lot of the tax policy of what we're going to see through the next fiscal year. And there was a few changes to that. We did see an increase in the conveyance tax. So any sale on a home now, there was an increase to that tax now. And then we also have a few other taxes that also I want to get into as well. Susan, do you want to talk about your experience on how the conveyance tax as a practitioner affects your business and your clients?
So hopefully you all realize that we pay a conveyance tax. Sometimes it's a surprise to our sellers when we go to closing and say, hey, by the way, you have to pay a tax on what you've just sold. But this year, the conveyance tax has gone up 63%, pretty much. So right now, the way that the new law reads is we will be paying, or the sellers will be paying $7.50 per thousand on the first $800,000 of the sale. Once it goes over $800,000, they pay that original at $15, $7.50 per thousand. But once it goes over $800,000, the remainder over $800,000 goes up $15 per million. So per thousand. So you've got quite a substantial tax bill if you're selling, $1 million property, which is not unusual in Rhode Island anymore. I mean, before it used to be that our median house price was $240. Now our median house price is almost $500,000. So $1 million is not unheard of at all. And, most of you out there are dealing with $1 million properties. So now you have to tell your sellers that for the first $800,000, you're paying $7.50 per thousand. After that, for the next $400,000, you're paying $15 per thousand. It's a big chunk of change. We fought this tooth and nail. And again, the budget, as Trevor said, I've never seen so much activity on the budget, and everything was revolving around what the budgetary needs were. So this was huge, and I think we're going to have a lot of pushback as soon as it takes effect. And Monica, takes effect right away, doesn't it?
No, the conveyance tax takes place October 1st. So that increase. And then I just want to quickly mention, I just posted 2 links in chat. And I know sometimes it drives people crazy to have to monitor that or, while people are talking, but those are the only 2 I'm going to post. One of them is a bulletin from the Division of Taxation. And for anyone of either you or your clients who are really detail oriented, it breaks down and gives examples of all 3 taxes that Susan and Trevor will be talking about today. And then before that, I also posted a link of a legislative update for RIAR, so that all the bills that we'll be talking, or new laws or defeated laws that we'll be talking about today, you'll find that there, and it's also on RIRealtors.org. So anyway, so you get to October 1st for that one.
So I want to stress, as you're talking to your clients about this, hopefully they're enraged. I mean, this is not just a realtor issue. This is a consumer issue. And hopefully they're so enraged that they'll pick up the phone or pick up a pen or start writing an email to their representatives, to their senators, to their representatives. They're the ones that pass this. So again, we need to light a fire, and it's not just the realtors. And this is a consumer issue. So please get everybody fired up on this one, and maybe there might be some leeway. Trevor, is this a good time to talk about the potential of an October legislative regathering?
So I would think so. So we are looking at possibly coming back. The session is going to be possibly coming back in October. A lot of that has to do with speculations of the federal budget that came down, which has some wins through NAR, but at the same time, it has not given enough state aid in some areas, which the General Assembly needs to come back and meet on funding those key priority issues. So I do expect, it hasn't been formally announced, but I will say that I do expect that the General Assembly come back in October for that. That does mean that the bills that were proposed in last session, they will be brought up again. So we will be seeing a lot of those bills that were previously voted on. A lot of them can be reconsidered for a vote, and they can be used as a bargaining tool for votes for some members in exchange. So yeah.
That being said, it's not too late. The session may be over. It ended in June, but there may be another comeback in October. So get people fired up on this. Let me talk also now about the short-term rental tax. There's been a lot of changes with short-term rentals, and this is something that we have been fighting for several years now. But previous to this, short-term rentals were paying a 7% sales tax and a 1% local hotel tax. With the new law that's changed now, we're if a whole house is rented for less than 30 days, it's now going to be subject to the 7% sales tax, a 5% hotel tax, and the whole home tax, and an additional 2% local hotel tax. So now the taxes are going to be raised up to 14%. It had been 8%, now it's going to be 14%. Again, another consumer issue. People who own the short-term rentals that they Airbnb it, they're going to pass that on to the consumer. And, we've looked at who's renting the Airbnbs in Narragansett. It's a lot of Rhode Island people. And, that 14% tax increase is just being passed on to the consumers. So again, get riled up and start making some noise with your legislators. We keep doing it, but they keep hearing from us. I know the Speaker of the House told me that there weren't enough realtors involved. So this is where we need you guys to pick up the phone and start making a nuisance of yourself and call your clients and tell them to do the same thing. So roots organization. The other tax that got a lot of publicity, and I'm remiss if I don't thank Chris Whitten, our current president. He did quite a bit publicly. He went on public radio. He did a lot of interviews with what they were calling the Taylor Swift tax. So this tax is on houses that are not owner occupied for more than, most of the year. And what they're doing, over $1 million of assessed value, the tax is going to be $5 per thousand. This is not a one-time tax. This is an every year tax. It's going to be collected by the municipalities. But this is a big, big change. They call it in some other states the mansion tax, and sometimes they collect it upon the sale of the house, not every year. So this is a real sea change for the tax situation. Again, get your clients involved, and if they want to talk to us, have them feel free to call us, but really, let's get involved on this one. So Mike, I know that you did a lot of talking at the State House. You were really helpful with us. Did you actually end up talking about the taxes as well? I know you did a couple of other things.
No, didn't have the opportunity with regards to the Taylor Swift tax or the D-transfer tax, unfortunately. That was short notice and I wasn't able to attend that session, unfortunately, but we had quite a few people go. And it's sad when you see things like that get thrown into a bill at the last second. It doesn't give us the opportunity to have enough time to plan and protest essentially against things like that. But like just to piggyback what Susan said, it's important moving forward that we raise hell, so to speak, with regards to these two taxes that were passed, because I don't think people realize how many properties in Rhode Island that are over $1 million that were inherited weren't really worth that much when the families originally purchased them. Nobody would ever guess 30 years ago that a ranch house in Narragansett would be 900 grand. So what's happening is generational wealth that's been built up with some of these houses that have conveyed is going to be ruined. These people are going to be forced to sell more times than none. Anything over $1 million is purchased by people from out of state in New York, Massachusetts, you name it. I believe 62% of all sales of homes over $1 million were to folks from out of state. So it's really ruining the generational wealth that Rhode Islanders have created for decades. So again, going forward, we really need to fight this one. I don't think we should let it go. And I think we should do everything we can to have everyone we know who's a homeowner contact their representatives and their senators and know, because again, we have elections coming up next year and we need to put some pressure on these people.
And I think one of the points that Chris made when he was talking on the radio is they were calling it the Taylor Swift tax. And I think they did that, with something in mind, because most people like Taylor tax, she can afford it, and her new tax bill is going to be, I think it's like $176,000 a year that she's going to be paying extra. But it's again, so she can afford it. A lot of people like, so what? But like Mike said, it's, my cousin from Cranston, whose mother bought a house in 1938, that house is now worth $1.5 million. Who would have thought? But on that 500,000, extra money, he's going to be paying, $5 per thousand every year on that. So again, let's get angry about this. This isn't fair that everything is falling on the back of the property owners. So my 2 cents with getting involved.
Can I just want to read one thing. I've been answering the other questions in the Q&A, but I think this is a really good comment that I think everyone appreciate hearing. This is from Julie Shalou. And out of all the people that love Rhode Island are now passing the properties to out-of-state people that aren't in love with Rhode Island. I saw Speaker Shekarchi's words on this, and it was not in line with what was happening.
We need to educate. That's part of the Government Affairs Committee's job, is to educate the legislators as to what's going on in the real estate market. We have tremendous resources with NAR and with all the research that RIAR does. So one of our jobs is to educate them, but sometimes it falls on deaf ears, and it's really, people calling and pestering and getting everyone else to call. That's what's going to make the changes.
Susan, could I just add one thing to that comment that Julie had made? Trevor and I did attend uh, Sikarchi's luncheon on behalf of the Rhode Island Association of Realtors to represent, consumers and let them know that we have a presence. And, I think we originally thought that Mr. Sikarchi was pro housing. And I just am starting to feel like after this past session, he's not necessarily on our side. He could be, but it just didn't show this year. So we're just going to have to press him harder and harder the next time around. It's super important that people really let him know that we are not happy with some of this legislation that they snuck in.
Yeah, and actually, I'm going to quickly add into that too. I understand. He had put out a fantastic housing package to cut red tape and give the ability to build more housing. And as much as these taxes on our industry, I will say we're not the only one that's getting taxed. We did get hit the hardest. And I will also say I'm not gonna, I don't want to, I'd rather give him the benefit of the doubt too, in a way, and also say, our state, we're in a very unique well, we're not in a very unique situation because every state is actually getting hammered on the lack of state aid from the federal government. So you have the lack of state aid from the federal government, and we were already looking at an issue with the budget as far as we were already in a budget deficit on top of that. And then you have these key projects such as the bridge. So I do understand that there needs to be some sort of revenue gained to make up for the losses, whether it's from the federal government or whether it's from just the budget in general. So I will give him the benefit of the doubt on that. I will say we are definitely grateful though, on the other hand, that he has brought a really good package out for cutting red tape and producing more housing. Unfortunately, we just wish that the issue with taxation just went a little bit differently. And that's something that we're going to look forward next year to really be on top of significantly more with both the governor's office and the House Fiscal Office as well, and the House Fiscal Committee. So I did also just want to put that out there because I do think that like I said, legislatively we've done a really good job, and I think he has helped us in some areas. Unfortunately, the issue of taxation, while I get, and we're not the only industry, but we're the hardest hitting industry, I do think that hopefully we can get back on next year and hopefully work with the House fiscal staff to really iron this out, because at the end of the day, all these taxes all the progress that's being made of cutting red tape, producing more housing, and then you add taxes like this on top of that, that kind of washes out the whole entire thing. And it almost seems like, the affordability aspect of it still doesn't go away. The affordability aspect of home ownership, unfortunately, there are people, like Susan said, the average home now in Rhode Island, the median average home is actually up to $520, which is fairly farther increase, I should say, than what we have been seeing in a trend of the past few years. So it's increasing at a quicker pace. So any taxes like this obviously does not do any good for first-time home buyers or home buyers in general. But I did want to throw that out there. I don't know if Susan has any comments as well on that.
To add to that, the speaker's bills on housing were very successful. He has adopted certain electronic permitting. He's expanded zoning in most of the municipalities mandated. So there's definitely things that he's done, or they've done, the State House has done to alleviate a lot of the concerns that we've had as practitioners in private property rights. So again, thank you for all of the work that's been done on that score. And as Trevor says, I mean, taxes are a tough issue because bills need to be paid. And as everyone knows, across the country, it's it's becoming more and more difficult, and the money has to come from somewhere. We just like to protest, and we want to protest when it's always private property taxes that pay the bill. But there's other things that we want to discuss. So what
Actually,
else do you
Susan,
have, Trevor?
before you move on to that, I just want to chime in with a couple of things about the taxes. So I did reach out to the Division of Taxation right when all of it, just at the very end of the legislative session. If any of you have ever, I never thought I'd say something nice about a taxing organization, but they have a new Office of Taxpayer Experience. And I have to say, I've never gotten responses so quick before. I mean, I'm talking about within a half an hour, 15 minutes, an hour. Anyway, so I've been sending some of the questions I've been getting from realtors like you about these different taxes. I've been forwarding on to the Office of Taxpayer Experience. They will be doing training sessions in the fall for this whole home tax, where the new whole home tax for short-term rentals. The other tax, and I just wanted to quickly mention the dates that all these, because we're getting some questions in the Q&A about when these different taxes go into effect. I'll repost the link of the legislative update in case any of you joined us late. You'll see all the dates in there, so I'm just going to rattle them off quickly. The conveyance tax increase takes effect October 1st of this year. The whole home tax, which is that short-term rental tax, that takes effect January 1st, 2026. And the unoccupied home tax, also known as the Taylor Swift tax, that is set to go into effect on July 1st of 2026. And that one, I did get a little interesting tidbit from the Division of Taxation. When that was put into the budget, it was, well, first of all, it was an exact repeat of something that the legislature had tried about 10 years ago. And our communications department actually pulled out things. So it was just word for word what they tried to do at that time. But at any rate, that tax, the legislature never even broke down numbers for that. Because usually with the budget, and the rest of our panelists can talk more about that, but usually with the budget, they, if they're doing a tax increase or changes in revenue, they break that down as part of the budget. This one, they didn't assign any income to. And there are hints that some people thought that the state might be sued over this, that there are some kind of legal challenges to it. So I know this is something that Susan and Trevor and Mike, the committee, had already talked about, making some of these taxes as priorities to try and fix them, if not get rid of them next year. So, okay, back to you and Trevor and Mike.
Yeah, actually, I'm going to throw in there real quick too. I do want to also emphasize that should we, as I expect to come back in October, a lot of what is in the budget as of right now, because of the deficit in the lack of state aid, it's important to note that what's in the budget right now is unfortunately going to be what's in the budget for the fiscal year 26. We can hopefully change that in fiscal year 27, but the only thing that they're going to end up doing is obviously they're going to want to add to what's in the budget, whatever they decide to come up with as far as a new tax policy or any tax increases. But we can fight the increases, but I definitely don't want to sugarcoat the fact that no taxes are going to be pulled out in October. It's just going to be, what are they going to add, or what are they going to increase, and what can we do to stop either an add or an increase to any of the taxes that are already laid out on the table. I think that's pretty important to know too.
So maybe it might be time to segue into some of our wins. So there were multiple rent control bills that were proposed this year. There was one that would have prohibited landlords from increasing rent by more than 4% per year. There was another one that would have prevented landlords from increasing rent by more than 10% plus the increase in the consumer price index. Those were defeated. There was also a bill that was called the Just Cause Eviction legislation. This one was also defeated. The bill would have abolished the landlord's existing right to terminate a lease. And it would have prevented landlords from evicting tenants unless the landlord could document that the eviction was for an acceptable purpose that was defined by legislation. So currently, landlords can, and this continues because it was defeated. Currently, landlords can terminate a tenancy to move into a rental unit or have a family member do so. That was going to be ended. The legislation did not pass, but this is one of the ones that's going to be on our radar because it's likely to be refiled. So for now, landlords continue to be able to terminate month-to-month tenancy for any reason within 30 days notice, as well as unwritten rental agreements and leases. Monica, did you have anything else that you wanted to say about the just cause eviction?
No, I think I'm all set with that one. I've got a couple of other smaller rental issues, but I'll wait. I'll hold off on those.
Okay.
What I will say, if I could really quick too, is that a lot of these wins on the rental issues, we've actually had a really good partnership and a very good job. We've done a really good job fighting all the rental restrictions with the Rhode Island housing providers, Rhode Island Coalition of Housing Providers. I know Mike is also a part of. If Mike also wants to chime in here and kind of give us an update on that as well.
You know, I really thank you for mentioning that. So most of you might not know this, but we have sort of a sister coalition helping us. I mean, they're real watchdogs. So the Rhode Island Coalition of Housing Providers literally updates landlords daily if there's any type of legislation that's going on. And right now, there is legislation being proposed at the local level in Providence that mirrors the first right of refusal legislation that we fought. I believe it was over a year ago. I think 2 sessions ago, I don't know if it was in this particular legislation this year, Trevor, where the tenant would have first right of refusal if the landlord was looking to sell the property. So it got defeated at the state level, and now they are bringing it up at the local level in Providence, where a tenant would have up to 90 days to be able to buy the property before a landlord could list it on the open market and let the market dictate the cost or the value of the property. But the Rhode Island Coalition of Housing Providers is an amazing group. And if you guys are interested, I would highly suggest that you join their group on Facebook because, again, I think they're doing one of the most outstanding jobs keeping watch on everything's going on. And
Yeah.
they sat alongside us, right, Trevor? We testified with regards to certain legislation that was in the best interest of RIAR and our constituents, and they testified with other legislation that we thought was in the best interest of landlords and was better suited for them to testify with regards in favor or against. Wouldn't you agree?
I definitely agree, and they were actually on the forefront of, and we were trying to come up with a positive solution and a joint solution to the lead bill as well, which we had legislation drafted. We had drafted it right in the beginning of the session. We had sponsors that were willing to put it out. Unfortunately, when we met with the AG, it was a very positive meeting, actually. We had a very good meeting. And then it wasn't until actually mid-year when I actually got the call saying that there were a lot of changes that are trying to be proposed that want to be taken out of our legislation. So we were kind of fighting with the AG and his staff, his general counsel on that as well. And unfortunately, it ended up dying in committee because more so the political side of it was the House wanted to make sure that it was correct standards by the AG to file this bill and make sure that a lot of the restrictions on the lead registry were lifted. I will say that this is going to be the biggest priority for next year. I am expecting to submit the same exact version that we submitted this year. And we are going through the House and Senate and even the governor's office. And we're going to work with the legislators to hopefully lift a lot of these restrictions, to lift the burden off of some of these rental properties who might have lead or don't have lead, but they need a lead certificate because it was built before 1978. So that is definitely going to be the foremost important issue that we're going to be focusing on next year. And like I said, we already have the language that we want. It's all about refiling that for next session. And we're hoping to not really honestly go through the AG's office. We're going to be pushing this hard and going through the General Assembly. At the end of the day, the General Assembly is the one that makes this decision. And it's not necessarily up to the Attorney General. And I think the House wanted to be a little bit more courteous and make sure that it was okay with the AG. But next year, we're going to be taking a tougher approach on this for sure. And we're going to make sure that the House and Senate and the General Assembly know that it's the responsibility of the General Assembly to pass a law to either fix or bring on new laws. And it's not really in the interest of the Attorney General. They don't have that. They don't have that authority. While we can be courteous and give them the give them the insight and feedback, we're going to be pushing this all the way through the General Assembly. So I did want to add that in as well.
They
And
chime
like I
in on a
said,
couple of,
RICOP is, like I said, Rhode Island Coalition of Housing Providers. They've been really, really good with us, with working with us, and at pretty much every bill, especially the lead bill. I'm sorry, Monica, go ahead.
oh, sorry, Trevor. Actually, so a couple folks have posted the Facebook page, a link to that for the housing providers. I just want to mention one of the things in the legislation that RIR had filed to reform the lead bill was the issue about evictions. The current law is, and in case you're not familiar with it, the current law is a landlord cannot evict a tenant for non-payment of rent in a property built before 1978 if there aren't lead certificates and it hasn't been registered. Also, a tenant, if the property doesn't have a certificate built before 1978, a tenant can petition the district court to pay their rent there. So then the landlord would have a double whammy of having to pay for lead inspections, lead mitigation, while they're not getting rent paid to them directly. One question I just wanted to mention that I've been getting a lot on the legal hotline this past month that relates to lead has to do with transfers of real estate. So the question I keep getting is, if a property is built before 1978 and a seller is a rental property and a seller is selling it, do they have to provide a lead certificate in order for the property to close? And you're waiting with bated breath. So the answer is no. There's nothing in the law that requires that. Then now the property owner would be in violation of the existing law if there are tenants in there. But if they haven't actually been provided with the notice of violation, then they can still transfer. So something right now, I know it's still been a seller's market, but something in the long run, something might become part of more negotiations about how to deal with that lead issue, especially if the new owner wants to use it as a rental property.
So
Okay.
Monica, to clarify that, if there has been a notification of violation, then that property cannot be transferred?
Well, the notice of violation would have to be addressed before it could be transferred.
Okay,
It's something that a title attorney would be looking for. Yep.
okay.
Oh, and one other quick issue, Susan, when you were talking about the just cause eviction, we did have a good reminder that came in through the Q&A, which was that the rent control bill has most of the rent control bills have elements of just cause eviction in them, and vice versa. So we gotta do a twofer and get rid of them both, as the organizations have done this year. So
I was just reminded of having this meeting last summer. I don't know how many of you actually came and listened to us last year. But we were talking a lot last year about radon and about the electrician's bill. Just wanted to give you a quick update. It's been very quiet on radon this year, and we were definitely poised to have a huge fight over it. It didn't happen, but that doesn't mean that it's not on our radar for next year. So we are definitely keeping that in our sight and to see if anything should happen more with the radon. And then the electrician's bill, which I know a lot of you, there was a lot of confusion that went on about the electrician's bill and what the inspectors could do about that. The Department of Labor and Training did come out with a statement, and I think that it's available on the website, on our RIR website. If not, we can get that available. But basically, it clarified it, that saying testing wires is different than using a receptacle tester or using a GFCI receptor test or smoke detectors. So those can certainly be tested by a buyer, by an appraiser, by a home inspector. It's a matter of when the wires are actually opened, and that's when it can't be done. So if you need more information on that, I'm sure that we can put that up regarding what the Labor and Training Department put out. So I just wanted to give you two clarifications on something that we were working on last year.
Yeah, and that's actually a big issue. So I know that we ended up filing legislation this year. We had a couple of people that were willing to file this legislation, I should say, and we were able to get this done, make a fair deal for this year at least. That's not to say that we'll be back next year to make hopefully more changes to it to make it a little bit easier for the home inspectors as well. But we filed legislation this year, and after filing, while we were filing that legislation, we were able to get this done in the backgrounds in the regulatory process. And when we brought this up to after multiple interviews that Chris Whitten had with different news channels, and actually bringing up the fact that you can't even turn on a light switch according to the interpretation of what the law says. The Department of Labor and Training and the Electricians Board actually came out saying that we can use receptacles. It is not touching a wire. We can turn light switches off and on. It's not touching a wire, which we had originally thought would be the case anyway. So we are very happy that we were able to get that interpretation through them. Next year, hopefully we can chip out of the way a little bit more and make sure that we can get back to the way it should be, to be completely honest. Make sure that there's no backlogging of, I know that there's a lack of home inspectors. There's no backlogging of transferring homes from seller to buyer. So that is a very important detail that I would like to make too, and I do credit the volunteers on that as well, especially Chris Whitten, who, like I said, has been in the media a lot and has definitely talked about that. One of the biggest, arguably one of the biggest things that's happened this session, and it was a very good win at a very early, the very early start of session, I should say. So yes, I do thank everybody for that as well.
Trevor, could I just jump in really quickly with just to follow up on that? So with the electrical, so with that, lately I've been getting some questions from realtors about clients who maybe have had a bad experience with an electrician doing I'm not saying everybody, I'm just saying a handful have contacted me, and they're trying to understand, like, we know how to file a complaint with the Department of Business Regulation against a real estate broker, but how do we file a complaint against an electrician? So I have to honestly say, it probably took me about an hour to get a straight answer from the Department of Labor and Training, because none of this was on their website. And they initially were trying to send me to the Department of Business Regulation. So at any rate, Trevor and I will be, they've canceled the last two meetings, but Trevor and I are planning to go to the Board of Electricians meeting, and we'll be sending a letter to them, to the chair as well, just to get some better clarification and improve how they handle the complaint process. Because right now, the fact that, like, not to pat myself in the back, but I'm a lawyer, I couldn't figure out how to get the complaint form or find it anyplace. I think there's a lot of room for improvement. So, okay, enough said on that. So go ahead.
So I think after once we get through the October session, I think that there are some big things that we are looking forward to throughout the off season that I would like to be doing to kind of increase engagement a little bit more from other, whether it be from associations or brokers or real estate agents alike. So going from here and looking forward, kind of going into next year, like I said, the biggest priority we'll be having will be the lead for sure. And the electricians will be another one that we'll be eyeing as well. Usually we'll keep an eye on, I mean, realistically, rent stabilization, rent control, those bills come up every year. And we've done a fantastic job as far as shutting that down. I think only two two landlord tenant bills actually got passed, which out of how many there were in general, that's a huge accomplishment. I actually would like to actually touch on one of them. I think there were a couple of landlord tenants in there as well. I think there was the immigration prohibiting a background check on someone's immigration status that did get passed. So now you're not able to, you can still do a background check on criminal history. You can do a background check on credit history. You can't do a background check on a person's immigration status as well. So I did want to throw that out there too, because I think that might have been a big thing for the Rhode Island Coalition of Housing Providers as well. Mike, I'll kind of defer that one to you. You're pretty involved in that organization as well. So
Well, with regards to the immigration one, that one there, I would rather have the Coalition of Housing Providers, answer that question. If anybody has, any curiosity on that, you can easily reach out to the group. They're extraordinarily responsive and find out. I don't know where their actual stance is. I mean, obviously there are concerns with regards to when it comes to immigration status that may be on an individual landlord basis. So I don't know if the entire coalition is either opposed or in favor of it.
Well, that one actually already passed, so it went
Right.
into effect in
No, meaning, if they
Next.
were opposed or in favor, I
Oh, at
do
the
know
time,
that
I'm sorry, yeah.
and I do know that they were definitely opposed to the legislation that was proposed to prohibit you from doing a criminal background check. Now that one, presented a problem. And I think it was a common sense thing to have that one struck down, and they were successful in that one.
So with the immigration law, so one thing that landlords can still actually several things landlords can continue to do. You just can't specifically ask, are you a US citizen? Or ask, show me your papers, basically. You can ask them for ID, just as you would any rental applicant, whether it's a driver's license, a passport, anything like that. Also, there is a little bit of protection for the landlords in the new law, which is that towns and cities and housing agencies can't ask the landlord to essentially become an immigration agent and ask, find out, like verify are all the tenants citizens, do they have green cards, whatever the case might be. There are a few questions that have been coming up from a gentleman in the Q&A, and I just want to mention it has to do with immigration, so I'll just mention that. We've got and a lot of the other questions that we have that haven't been answered yet. I think if we get through the legislative update, we could talk more about involvement. A lot of questions about how do we get involved with the Government Affairs Committee, races, things like that. So the question that I'm just going to read, and frankly, I do not know the answer to this, so it's something I'm going to have to research further, and I'd encourage the person who posted it to follow up with us. But the question is, how do we repeal Governor Chafee's 214 executive order directing state agencies not to cooperate with ICE and the federal government? Federal funds are being withheld because Rhode Island has refused to cooperate with ICE and the federal government, leading to this raise in taxes. Like I said, I do not know the answer. I don't know if anyone else does, but I was certainly happy to look into it, Sean.
Yeah, so you can typically, so the governor does have the ability to draft an executive order to repeal an executive order. I would be unsure. I would have to double check on if the legislature would have that authority, but I definitely know that the executive has that authority to repeal an executive order by using their own executive order. It has been done on a federal level, and it can be done on a state level as well. So that'd be the answer to that question.
Thanks, Trevor. I think the person's concern is that leading to some of the need to make up funds in the budget? In other words, are we losing out on federal funds because of that? That's the piece I'm sorry, but I don't know. So, but we can look into that further. But yeah, but what Trevor said about the process, that's how the process would work. Exactly.
Right, and NAR is usually the, I can actually even follow up that question with a question to NAR as well. NAR might have actually a better answer on that, considering it's actually related to the federal government. And I don't want to overstep or supersede the federal jurisdiction for NAR, just like I don't want to do that with any local association as well.
So I have a question, like I said, to some of you who are posting, I'm trying to answer most of them in writing, but this one's on the topic of with immigration. So the question is, how does a landlord ask about citizenship status? And it's actually a good question because, so it's kind of saying like, are you here in the country legally? Are you an American citizen? Were you born in this country? Those are the kind of questions that would be prohibited under, but actually not would be, are prohibited under the new law. So, but like I said, you can still ask for identification. You can do just as you would with any other rental applicant. So,
You can ask for verification of financial qualifications. What you can do a credit check, you can do employment verification. So there's a lot of ways to make sure that they're going to be able to pay the rent. So you can still do that.
absolutely. And then, would it be okay if I chimed in about there's another short-term rental bill I just want to mention quickly, or new law actually, if I can.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Yes.
So there is one about, now this is something, honestly, it was news to me, but so over the years, you've probably heard stories about human trafficking, which are really heart-wrenching stories, people forced into sexual slavery or forced labor. One of the main areas where that has occurred has been in hotels and motels. Hopefully not. And now, unfortunately, it's starting to creep into short-term rentals as well, according to the national organization that deals with human trafficking prevention. So this year, the legislature passed legislation that requires anyone who works for, whether it's a hotel or anyone who is operating a short-term rental, so the 30 days or less rental, cottage rental, seasonal rental, whatever it might be, they'll be required to complete training to look for signs, identify signs of human trafficking, and what to do if you notice that. That training will be approved by the Department of Business Regulation, and the training will be completed once a year. Now, I immediately contacted the Department of Business Regulation to say, oh my gosh, people have to take like 3 hours of this every year, and not to minimize the importance of the topic, but I could hear the potential questions we were going to get right away. So the Department of Business Regulation is actually trying to look for free or low cost options. They also want, and they'll be putting out an advisory, probably this one goes into effect in January of next year, January 1st. So they'll be putting out an advisory. I think they're aiming for September, but let's say mid-fall. So we're continuing to work with them. And so questions that people have, I've been sending right off to the Department of Business Regulation so that they can address those in a frequently asked question type column. I know that Rhode Island Association of Realtors is looking at offering a class. Potentially it could be even just an hour class. And then you set up, and we'll put together a sample template that you could use for an office policy about this. So the main thing is, it's really just making sure that if there are any kind of warning signs that maybe a lot of us haven't thought about or aren't familiar with, that you're able to identify those when you're leasing a short-term rental. So whether as a landlord, or as a property manager. Okay.
Monica,
So-
potentially with that RIAR class, could it be used as a requirement, to settle the requirement for the state? And the realtors could also get 1 credit hour?
Yep, that's
Yes,
exactly
okay,
what
good.
our Department
Great.
our Division of Professional Development is
No,
working on.
fantastic,
Yes.
fantastic.
I
Yep.
think having a lot of those opportunities to do that while you're getting your certification, I think is way more convenient than going to a class over at the Department of Business and Regulation as well. So just to kind of move on a little bit in the interest of time, we talked about short-term rentals, we talked about the budget. We talked about the housing production and the cutting the red tape in the housing package that the speaker put out. Another interesting piece of legislation we filed this year was there was some motivation to it, and that was for the eminent domain. As of right now, the city or town can take a property that is not being used for economic development purposes, but for public service purposes. They can take that property, and they can actually take that without any approval of funding in place, no design plan, no plan of no timeline or layout. And there was one municipality, I won't actually call out anybody on that municipality, but we saw that and we realized how big of an issue that is and the ripple effect it could have across the state. So I was actually working with our general counsel, our government affairs committee, and even some people who have had an issue with this in the past. And we have drafted legislation so that way we can make it a requirement that they would have to go through the proper parameters, just as if they were taking a property for an eminent domain use. So they would have to go through the town or city council for fundings that would have to be in place, for design ideas, and any public input and comment sessions within the town and city, as well, to kind of give it more of, rather than having a loose, the ability for a city or town to come in here and take a property and claim it to be eminent domain for a public use. They would have to follow the same parameters as if it were someone being, they were using it for economic development reasons. That bill did not pass successfully. However, those types of bills do tend to take a little bit longer to develop, but we will be filing that as well next year as another priority of ours as well. So we do have a nice list of priorities, and once we get back into session for 2026, we do have a number of things that we'll be looking over, things that have come up, even like I know Monica's also gotten questions on the condos and closing on condos as well. Do you actually want to mention that real quick? I know you've been getting calls on
Sure.
some of the sales, the closings, issues on closings.
Yeah, thanks, Trevor. This is an issue that's been flagged by both the Realtor Association Forums Committee and Risk Management Committee. And also I've been getting a large number of calls this past month in the legal hotline about condominiums. So the issue is this, if you haven't had to deal with it before, you probably know, if you've listed or helped someone buy a condo before, that the seller and condominium association have to provide a resale certificate for if it's a resale of an existing condominium, or a public offering statement if it's new construction. What I'm finding that people may not have known is that until the buyer actually gets, I'll just stick with the resale certificate because it's the same idea. Until the buyer gets the resale certificate, the buyer can back out of the transaction, be entitled to a full refund of the buyer's deposit, no questions asked. So that's before you deliver the resale certificate, or that the condo association provides the resale certificate. And then for 5 days after that, or until closing, whichever comes first. So you might think, so one solution, you'd think, oh, well, why doesn't the seller and the condo association, why don't they just provide this right up front and lock the buyer in? Well, I think all of you wise people in the panel who are shaking your heads, Mike or Susan, you want to answer that one?
Yeah.
Why would they do that up front?
Well, they can't issue it until the month of the closing. So if the closing's occurring, let's say on the 5th, you can't, the 5th of August, you can't get the resale certificate in July. It has to be dated for August.
Right, because that's what exactly, that's what the lenders require. So you've got people kind of torn between these two competing interests. And so one of the things, and when we found is some of you who might be listening today also might be licensed in Massachusetts. Some of the people in our committees who are licensed there are saying, we don't have to do any of this in Massachusetts. I mean, the condo association issues the resale certificate or condo, whatever they call it, condo questionnaire. But the buyer can't just back out. Like that's just sort of part of what's leading up to closing. So that's because of the number of calls and the potential risk for our members about this, and also the public offering statement, it's 10 days afterwards. Resales 5 days afterwards. So that's something the Government Affairs Committee discussed briefly at its last meeting, and we'll explore further, look at some ideas from other states. So there hasn't been a formal vote on it yet, but that's something, and frankly, any ideas that you have, one person, Sean, who's posted a few times about immigration in the Q&A, if people have questions about legislative issues, why does the law do this? Does this make sense? I heard about another state that does such and such. Pass them on to Trevor. I don't want to volunteer Susan and Mike. They can decide, but pass them on to Trevor because that's something the committee can discuss and see if it makes sense to file. But we really appreciate any suggestions you have. Okay,
Yeah.
sorry, that was longer than you wanted me to go, Trevor. Sorry.
No, you're good. I think you kind of hit the nail on the head there. And just to kind of, branch off of that too is, the suggestions idea. I have gotten some calls that have been really eye-opening, especially, I actually had one recently last year that had to do with subdivision of lands. Make sure that that's going to be a priority next year because by the time we got that call, it was kind of the end of the year. And then there was also an issue as far as zoning in some localities where they only allow people to have 2-bedroom multifamilies, and you can't have a third bedroom multifamily. They kind of prohibit that in multifamily. So we're kind of looking into that. While that might seem like a municipal issue, something could be done on the state. So definitely, if you think that there's something that could be affecting a local, feel free to also give, while you give your locals a call and hopefully bring it up to them as well, so that they stay in the loop. You can definitely give us a call too, see if there's anything that the state can do to kind of override or supersede that to make sure that all zoning is being inclusive rather than exclusive.
And Trevor, good point, because you're dealing with right now the Rhode Island Association of Realtors Government Affairs Committee, but every single the local boards all have a Government Affairs Committee, and they are represented on the Rhode Island Association Realtor Board. So if you bring it up to your local board, it can be brought up to us at that time, but there's a lot of resources out there. So feel free to use them.
Absolutely. So we're about 30 minutes left to go in this update. I will just go over a few of the updates I have received from NAR, from our federal level. And there's quite a bit of information and some big wins that have come out of the budget in the federal budget from last year. While we know that state aid isn't included, there were some big wins that kind of came out of that as well. One of the biggest things was the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act were slated to expire this year. I know that they were pushing for that this year, and tax reform as well. I believe they got an extension off of that. It is to what I believe they did. But I do know that they also have successfully advocated for permanent extension of lower individual tax rates, qualified business income deductions, section 199As, temporary 5-year quadrupling of the state local tax SALT deduction cap beginning in 25. and protection for business SALT deductions and 1031 exchanges as well. And then there was one more actually, permanent extension of the mortgage interest deduction as well. So those are some things that kind of came out of NAR. I don't know if anybody on the panel has any experience or has heard any feedback relative to that as well. I don't know if, I know Susan's on a NAR. She's one of our representatives on an NAR committee, as well as Mike. So I don't know if they have heard any feedback as well from either their constituents or what their committees have been talking about as well.
So, I mean, tax reform is always a big, one of the biggest things that NAR deals with. And, they have had a couple of wins this year. It's been a tough couple of years, and everyone's sort of not knowing what's going on. But they have done, as Trevor already talked about, made some progress. So I'm not sure, Monica, do we post what NAR is doing on our local, the statewide?
We have a national issues page.
So take a look there and see, again, if there's any questions, ask them of Trevor and Monica. They can answer them pretty well.
And
No,
I
I'll
can
stick
always
the
reach
link
out
in
to
chat.
NAR too.
Sorry, Trevor.
No, you're good. I can always reach out to NAR too, as far as we have great representation up there as well. That they're able to get me information, whether it's for legislative or for one of our members as well.
I did
The
just
other
put
thing
the
too
link
is
in
that
chat.
that we have representation to our members of Congress. So there is we call them FPCs, the federal, what is it called? Federal Political Consultant, FPC. Anyway.
Federal political coordinator.
Political coordinator. So there are 4 appointed Rhode Island realtors that each have representation with our Congress people. So our 2 senators and our 2 representatives. So again, if there's something that you need to get to that level, there might be the ones that you want to contact.
Monica, were you going to say something too?
Oh, just that I post a link in chat to the NAR advocacy page. Like I said, I know some people it just drives them nuts to post links, but I'm going to do it anyway for the people who feel like grabbing them. But we can send it out with a recap of the recording of the session if you'd like. And is it okay? I just have a couple of other new laws. May I just mention those or?
Yeah,
or
go right
yes,
ahead.
did you wanna-
Absolutely.
Okay. So some of these are, so one of them is if anyone who is listening to us today is licensed as a mortgage loan originator and a real estate broker or salesperson, you can still continue to have both of those licenses. What's changed though, and this actually goes back to the end of June, what's changed is you cannot use both in the same transaction. So I've always kind of given that advice when people have asked about being dual licensed, whether it's being a home inspector, whether it's being an attorney and a broker, other types of dual licensing in the same transaction. But now it's official. And the reason for it was the Department of Business Regulation wanted to make the laws in Rhode Island more consistent with what they're seeing at the federal level. So that's one. And the only other one I had to mention was public rights of way. So I know coastal access has been an issue, a hotly debated issue for the past, really off and on for a number of years, but really picked up steam now that the public can access up to the, what is it, the high, oh man, you can tell I don't live on the beach. Is it the high tide? Anyway, whatever.
It's
High
the
tide watermark.
mean high tide.
Thank you, Mike, for the save. All right, thank
Yeah.
you. So, but what I wanted to mention, so that law has not changed, but what has changed is that some towns and cities and also private property owners are trying to cut down on, abolish parking, where someone might access one of those rights of way to get to the beach. So a new law that just has went into effect actually the beginning of this month is that any town or city or private property owner who wants to try to restrict property near a public right-of-way that would give you coastal access would now have to file that plan with the Department of Environmental Management and CRMC, Coastal Resources Council, Management Council. And then there'd be a public comment period. So you can't just suddenly just put up a no parking sign in an area next to the right-of-way looking at you, Narragansett, which I think is what prompted the legislation. And then the other issue is the CRMC wants now towns and cities to publish public rights of way on their own maps. So CRMC has them posted on an official website, but they want to make sure that towns and cities do it too. So any of you who are dealing with people in, who are buying in coastal areas, renting in coastal areas, just be mindful of that. And everything that we've talked about today is discussed on RIRealtors.org. We have some links from the chat to give you more information, because I know it's a lot of information we're throwing at you. So I don't know if anyone has any comments before we turn to some questions, because there's some questions about how to get more involved. And I know that that's been a passion for the three of you. So one of the questions was how to get involved with the Government Affairs Committee, and how to get involved with their questions about candidates. How do we nudge our elected officials before they start running for office, or candidates? So who wants to tackle some of the member involvement?
I think, Trevor, you have a really good program that's broiling in the background, and I think maybe it's a good time to introduce it.
Yeah, no, absolutely. So actually, you had talked about federal political coordinators, FPCs, which are assigned by the association, a member to act as a liaison between the association and a member of Congress. Typically, those people are, someone they've known for years or have a good relationship, or they could just be someone that, they'll be developing a relationship as they go along. But ideally, they would have an established relationship already. A lot of states have organized a state political coordinator, which is the exact same thing, rather it's just on the state level. This is a highly successful tool, and I think that Rhode Island in particular has a huge advantage due to the fact that we are a small state. We're made up of 39 cities and towns. There's not a whole lot of, we have one of the smallest general assemblies. I think that there's a great opportunity to implement something like this on a state level as well. We are looking at some logistics behind it, but I am hoping that the state political coordinator program can be implemented before the start of session next year. So we are working with that. We are working to get that up and running in the background. The other thing too is I'm really big on engagement, making sure that our members are heard and everything, making sure that what we're doing is sufficient when we're going up to the State House and advocating for you. One of my ideas about this off session, and even during the October session, was going and hitting a few different brokers around the state, just to hear what we can do for the brokers. And typically when a broker gets involved in issues on a state or local level, it's more likely that the agent will also realize how important it is and how impactful it is to their industry, that they actually become involved as well. So I am hoping to, within the next few weeks or month or so, actually start reaching out to some brokers, or if any broker that is interested in doing this as well can absolutely feel free to reach out to me. What I've actually envisioned is having a one-on-one with the broker, and then come back and talk with, if they allow me to come back and talk with the agents. So that way I can update the broker one-on-one before I go to the agents, and then we can kind of give a preview of, what is coming down the line, and what you can do to help us, and how we can help you in the process in return as well. So those are a couple of things that I've been looking at, monitoring very closely when it comes to, how to keep the momentum up during the off season as well. And I think that's a really good idea. I think both of those programs will be very, very successful as far as getting more engagement.
So Trevor, just to piggyback on what you said about the state political coordinators, I think there are 75 representatives in the State House and 38 senators. So we're looking at more than 100 people that we need to become these state political coordinators. So if you guys, there are, I think, 114 participants. If you're interested in, or if you know your senator or your representative well, and this is the kind of thing that you could be called on to say, hey, listen, this is a key issue for the town of Foster, and this is what we need to talk about. Or this is a key, and your representative is on the committee that's going to hear that. That's when we would be really utilizing you. So if you have any interest at all, you know, this might be a way to get involved, very involved. So I think it's a great idea, Trevor, and I hope that we get a lot of people that are volunteering for these positions.
And actually, I think it's a fantastic idea, and just the fact that, if someone wants to get involved, but they can't get, they can't get too involved, um, it takes, it doesn't take that much to even, just pick up the phone and call your representative, have that one-on-one discussion with them. I had a very good conversation with a legislator up in Providence on an issue, and she actually turned around and said to me, my my sister-in-law is actually a realtor. I had no idea, and I wish I had known, because otherwise she could have probably educated me on a few topics before I voted on them in the past. So I think kind of getting ahead of the curve and getting in front of the 8 ball. Again, it's a very good way for people who want to get involved, but don't necessarily have as much time. It could be as simple as going out for coffee for about 30 minutes, or having a phone call real quick, just to give updates and statistics, or any information that they've experienced themselves within the industry. So I think that'll be very, very crucial, and it'll help us a lot as well.
Trevor,
I
I'm
guess-
wondering, too, if, sometimes things like, you're talking about the lead law and the efforts on that. It's really helpful to have numbers from people, right? Like, I think we've all probably informally gotten numbers from people saying, oh my gosh, it's going to cost my landlord this amount to comply with the lead law, or someone with a historic property. Some of you listening might manage or own those. So sometimes that can be really helpful for Trevor and for the Government Affairs Committee to just have some people who can give real numbers. This is what happened to me, and be able to share those with legislators. Because sometimes, they're looking at things in the abstract, and when you actually have a constituent in front of them saying, listen, this is going to cost me $60,000 for one house that's in a historic district. That can really make a difference and amplify what Trevor and the others are doing.
And what's really funny too is the fact that, well, it's not funny, but in a way that we'll get information from members who are saying that it's been taking months and months and months to get a lead inspector to come to their house. And so we'll bring that up with our Government Affairs Committee. We'll get a group of people to testify. And ironically, before we get called up, it's usually whoever is presenting the bill will get called up to testify first, or an elected official will also get recognized before it comes to the public interest portion of it. And it's funny because we'll say, we are having a hard time finding these inspectors, and it's taking me months, it's costing me a lot, and it will contradict what the person in front of us, which has been historically the AG's office, who are saying that there are plenty of lead inspectors, there are no lead inspector shortages, and they can call them up and say that they can get a test tomorrow, or an inspection in a week or so, and then we go up and say, well, our members, and actually the members you're going to be hearing from me after I speak, they're the ones that aren't able to get the appointments they need. And so now their brains start, the people on the committee, the members on the committee of the General Assembly, the wheels start turning. They're saying, well, I have a little bit more sympathy, and I think I have a little bit more trust that these members would actually have the knowledge of saying, well, I trust them that their information is more accurate than the Attorney General's office, because they're the ones that deal with it every day. So I think getting that just a little bit of that knowledge inside testifying is also very crucial, because then kind of gets their wheels start turning as well. Again, a lot of elected officials, they're not experts on housing. So the more that we can educate them, the more that we can provide personal experiences, the better off we're going to be in the long run. And that's what I make sure to tell the committee when they come up to me, to testify with me. I usually give the talking points, and I tell my government affairs committee, rather than just, going back to the same talking points every single time, give a personal experience, because the more personal experiences you have, the better, the most like the chances are greater for any sort of change that can affect what we're advocating on in the topic. So I think that's a great point to make as well. And hopefully we
Trevor,
can expand.
I'm sorry. Go
Oh,
ahead.
no. I was just, my last thing was hopefully we can even expand on, people who are interested and want to get involved, don't know how to get involved. We have a new CE class that hopefully will be starting up shortly for the government affairs course. And I'm hoping to grow that into more of a specialized area as far as how to testify, or even in some cases, if you're interested in running for a public position, I'm hoping to even hold a class on that. So, if you have some sort of political aspirations, we can kind of guide you into how to run and what you need to do in order to become a candidate and get your name on the ballot.
Oh, perfect. That was actually going to be one of my questions for you, so you got it. We have a couple of questions on here. Actually, several left we haven't answered, but maybe still getting more. But one of them, the question is, I know the question is that the Department of Health sent out letters and freaked out landlords last beginning of the month about the enforcement of the lead law. So the question is, when are they going to be fined? And so I've reached out to the Department of Health right when the letters went out, and they still have not picked a date. It was originally going to be July 1st when the Department of Health could start fining landlords who weren't in compliance with the registration and the lead certificates for pre-1978 properties. But right now they have not picked a date. So got a little bit more time. Don't get too complacent, but you got a little bit more time. And then there's one question, I don't know if anyone on the panel knows the answer to. It's a tax question. And the question is about mobile home sales. Are the taxes for mobile home sales staying at $280 per thousand, or are they increasing? I don't know if anyone knew about that.
Mobile
Yeah.
homes are treated a little bit differently. If they're in a mobile park home, it's a reduced rate, and I'm not sure what the new numbers are yet. So it's not going to be the $7.50 that a normal piece of property is. It's typically considered as personal property, not real estate property, but they still have a conveyance tax. If the mobile, and they make a distinction between mobile home and manufactured home, because now we're seeing a lot of manufactured homes that are being built on sites, and they're being treated just as regular houses at this point. If a mobile home or a manufactured home is not in a mobile park area, then it's treated just as regular real property. If it's in a mobile home area, it is different, but I don't know what that number is. I don't know what that has been. I'm sure it's also been increased. I don't know that, but we can find that out for you.
That's why I'm glad we have a panel. If one of us doesn't know the answer, someone else is likely to know the answer.
So I didn't see anything within the budget when I was skimming through the budget. I didn't see anything. I didn't see anything that mentioned mobile homes.
So it's currently $2.80 per thousand, I think. So
Correct.
again, I'm surprised
I
that
don't-
it didn't get raised too, but
That's I was gonna say, I don't think I didn't see anything new in the budget as far as having a increased rate on their tax fee. Yeah.
So we do have a question about one legal question, and the rest are really member involvement questions that I think all of you would probably want to answer. So the question is, if a landlord has registered their property, but haven't been able to get it inspected for lead because they can't get a hold of an inspector, can the landlord evict the tenant? So if the property is built before 1978, they cannot evict a tenant for non-payment of rent. they can evict a tenant for other reasons. And one thing that's come up is, someone who has a month-to-month lease or a month-to-month rental agreement has more flexibility. So, because at least for now, since thanks to fighting off this just cause eviction legislation, you can evict a tenant for any reason whatsoever for month-to-month tenancy. With a lease, though, it's a little trickier because if you specifically are saying, I'm evicting a tenant for non-payment of rent, that's where you would run into trouble. And unless you can show the court that you have a specific inspection schedule, they're looking at some on a case-by-case basis. But the law itself says that you can't evict a tenant specifically for non-payment of rent if there's not a lead certificate and registration for pre-1978 properties. But let's move back to involvement because we just have a few minutes left and people can contact me anytime with legal questions. So I know this is a big priority of our President-elect Mike as member involvement, as well as Trevor and Susan. So I just wonder if I'm a realtor who's never contacted my legislator, I've never been to the State House, I've never written testimony, like what do I do? How can I help you?
So I think the best answer to that is you can either contact me. I can give you the contact information on your legislator. Even if you don't know your district, if you don't know your district or legislator, actually, you can even go online on the Board of Elections and you can search your who your legislator is, and it'll give you who your federal delegation is. It'll give you who your governor, lieutenant governor, state senator, state rep are. But I can also put you in contact with someone in their office. What I would say too is that we are a part-time legislature here in Rhode Island, and because of that, there are a lot of senators and reps that do not have staff. So it is important to note that. So a lot of people, a lot of representatives and senators are actually coming from a full-time job, and they're coming at night to do work. They don't necessarily, I don't want to say they don't work during the day, but they have their full-time jobs that they still have, and they do that during the day, in the morning and during the day, and then at night they usually come back to the State House for their business there. How to get involved? Like I said, I'd be more than happy to connect you, or even find out who your legislator is, and then just have a simple conversation saying, I'm a constituent of yours. You don't have to tell them whether you voted for them or not. It's as simple as I'm a constituent of yours and I'm concerned of such and such an issue, and here are my personal experiences on how it's affected the industry and the housing industry as a whole. And what I will say too is you can always remind them that the housing industry makes up of, I believe, nationwide 30% of the nation's GDP. So imagine what that would be on a state level, right? So I think putting that in there and making them realize how important housing is in general at the end of the day to the Rhode Island economy. I think you'll be more apt to get a better response from them if you kind of throw something like that in there, because it still affects them at the end of the day. Long answer.
Plus, the State House is your house. They have a website, Rhode Island legislature.gov. They post every single meeting. Usually the legislature meets the first Monday after the new year. Go in there, just walk around. It's a gorgeous building. You can walk up to any of the reps and say hello. And then when they start having hearings, the hearings are usually at the Rise, which is 4:30, 5 o'clock. They post which committees are hearing which bills. So the best thing is to start looking at that website. I mean, I look at it on a daily basis to see what's going on, but I'm one of those nerds. But again, if you want to get involved, just go up to the State House and walk around. You'll find out a lot of things.
Excellent. And we are right at 11 o'clock. So I hope you'll join me in thanking our panelists, President-elect Mike Pereira, Government Affairs Chair Susan Martins-Phipps, Advocacy Manager Trevor Chasse, And I'm sorry, there are a couple of questions we didn't get to. I will follow up directly on those. There was one comment about getting involved at with the local government affairs committee. So I'd say if you don't have an active one at the local level, talk to your board of directors, talk to the association executive or CEO of your association. So this recording will be posted sometime probably by early next week. And thank you for taking the time out of your day. I think you qualify as policy nerds too if you took the time to attend this session. So we really appreciate it. We look forward to working with you to have a successful session. So thanks, everybody. Have a great day.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.